Okay, greetings, good morning. Okay, greetings, good morning. Sounds okay. Let's open up YouTube as well. Looks like Restream service might be back operational this morning. We'll even put our OBS over here. Play. Oh, there's a little detail wrong in that MooBot. Let me fix it. All right. It incorrectly said in there that it was going to be Fisher Random today, but today is back to normal chess. That was last week that we had Fisher Random. Hello, Skibix. How are you? Slept past 4 a.m. today. Feels good. How are you all doing? Learning the Nightorf and you keep losing. Any tips? Keep losing till you get better at it. Have you done anything to learn it other than playing it? Like, have you, I don't know, studied my course on Dojo or read a book or something? Yeah, the Gambit of Dad Life. Yeah, might not be the moment to play, but you could watch with us if the kids are down. For me, Dhruv, it's morning. How about for you? The variations are extensive. Well, Marble, could I suggest my own course? Here it is. The video, there's only one video. The video is freely available on YouTube. The rest of it is on the Dojo website. And well, honestly, I would gladly give it to him for free, Hockey Chess Dude. I'm just trying to offer them the best resource I know of. I can try and show you the course for free here. I can't see how much it costs because I have a Dojo training program membership. So when I go to courses, it just says included with subscription. Nightorf Sicilian. Here, Marble, there's this video, which I've already sent you a link to, which is available on YouTube. Then there's a PGN, It's very short. That's all the variations for the entire thing. That's the whole thing. Then there is sparring positions. You're supposed to play some quick games in these positions against somebody else. Black and white trading sides. Right? Each of those positions. I think I've got like 7 positions because this is supposed to be a very quick course for 1200 to 1800-ish level players. And then the last piece here, is there are these themes. And there's just a dozen positions here. And it just explains some ideas. Like here it explains the idea that black would be happy to go into an endgame. And it sort of shows why endgames are often good for black in the Sicilian. A large part of it is you often have like these strong pawns in the center. It's not an outside passer, but there's a way of sort of taking over the middle of the board with these pawns in the endgame. That's like a theme that often gives black an edge in the endgame. Then this game is really supposed to start here at move 10 where the explanations start. It just explains something about this pawn structure when white has a majority on the queen side and black like this. This is what happens if your D pawn gets traded for the E pawn at some point in the Sicilian. It comes up all the time. This is actually not from a Najdorf game. This is from a C3 Sicilian game. You know, like the, what do they call it? Alapin, maybe? I don't know, C3 Sicilian. Because this course, those tiny variations I showed you, Marble, they actually cover not just the Najdorf, they cover the C3 Sicilian, the D4 C3 pawn sack, the closed Sicilian, like everything. So there's just a dozen of these positions, you know, some thoughts on the exchange sack on C3, the idea of advancing your B pawn and when you do or don't want to play D5 as black in such positions. You know, and it's got ideas for white as well as for black, right? So here's like a bad version of playing B5. First, I show you a good version of black playing B5, B4. Then I show you a bad version of black playing B5, B4. Then I show you the idea of like gaining space to defend your king by moving your own F pawn when your opponent's pawn storming your king, etc. That I already took you through half of the examples, but you know there's some explanations and some variations. But there's like 12 themes like that, and then then there's model games, and again it's just like a dozen, or I guess there were so many good games I kept adding a couple more. There's 18 games to play through that are just going to show you really good play, typical for this opening, and so they're in a variety of variations. So you can see a good example of like a C3 Sicilian played by the first really good supercomputer. This is Deep Blue. Oh, I'm sorry, it's cut off. You can't quite tell, but this is Deep Blue, the computer playing against Kasparov. And yeah, there's C3 Sicilian. There's Bishop G5 Najdorf, Bishop E3 Najdorf. You know, just some good games in every line. All right. Now, thank you for the recommendation, Charlie. I do appreciate it from a fellow teacher very much. I did notice there's a question from Skibik, so let me go check that out. Yes, DL, the tournaments start in probably 21 minutes from you asked that question. At this point, 17 minutes. I'm sorry, I had your window covered with another window. Skibix has a tournament game tomorrow as white, and it's the first time I could check a bunch of my opponent's games. He plays almost exclusively the King's Indian. What line do you recommend for a beginner? There's several lines you could play against the King's Indian Skibix, depending on what you prefer. If you like endgames, you could play the exchange variation. You know, D takes E5, D takes E5, Queen takes D8. That's a good line. Then you could play like the most classical kind of variations possible. Let's open up a board where I can make a move. So honestly, the most classical line against the King's Indian is really good, which goes like this, right? And then knight f3, they castle, bishop e2. It's also kind of like the most clean and obvious moves, right? It's like if you can support your pawn center, you're happy to keep your pawns together. Right? If they ever play DE, you play knight d4, rook e1, cover the f pawn, the e pawn with the f pawn. But if they ever put enough pressure on your pawn with knight c6 or bishop g4 or something, then you play d5 gaining space, kick them back, and you play for b4 c5. It's the main plan. As with many chess openings, not all of them obviously, but as with many chess openings, it's turned out that, once they put the supercomputers on it, they found, oh, look, for all these years people have been playing like the critical line. How did they figure that out, Sort of mass wisdom. Then every now and then the computer comes up with something new and it's even more mind-boggling. But this line here, which is called the classical King's Indian or the bayonet attack, specifically if you play b4 pretty quickly, I would strongly recommend that. That's like the most classic King's Indian structure that one learns to play. It's difficult for white and black to play, and black players do want to get this position, but it's a great position to learn as far as getting good at the King's Indian defense. It sounds like you normally play the same-ish with f3. The same-ish with f3 is theoretically, good and sound. To me, it's slightly unnatural. But if you've played it before and you have any kind of feel for it and you like playing it, yeah, keep playing it. Oh, one other line that I've played a lot in my life that I always did well with was bishop e3. Bishop e3 has the trap, so to speak, that if they go here, you play d5 here, here, and if they start playing f5, you just don't castle kingside. Right? So you like queen c2, f5, f3, f4, here, here, and then you go g4. If your opponent takes, then you're going to castle queenside. If they don't take and they let you sort of hold the whole kingside closed with h3, then you can bring your king over to the kingside and continue a queenside attack. So this is a slightly sneaky line to play bishop e3 before castling. And one of the most common things people do then is they play here, trying to break open the center. And then you get this position here, which is interesting, slightly nice for white. The most complicated thing they can do is they can go knight g4 attacking your bishop, and then you get into these kind of weirder lines. These are a little bit weirder to play. Excuse me. By the way, folks, our rapid tournaments start here in 12 minutes. I'm just answering questions from chat while we wait for the tournaments to get going. But here you can see in the chess.com club that we've got a 1700 plus arena, 13 to 1700 arena, and under 1300 arena. You can also type !play in the Twitch chat to get direct links to that. And in between answering questions, I'm going to go tweet that these arenas are kicking off. Okay, tweeted. Good morning, Summoner. All right. So you've got all those options, Skibix. The knight g4 line is principled for black. Dripman, yeah, it's the trickiest one. But if you play h3 before bishop e3, then that's a cost of a tempo, and you're in some different lines there as well. That's very kind, Summoner. So let me know, Skibix, if you want more discussion of that question. Those are some suggestions. If you like endgames, try de5, de5, queen d8. Or if you want to win the game, try de5, de5, queen d8. Most black players playing the King's Indian don't want to play the endgame without queens. They'll be annoyed when you play that line. If you want to learn about the King's Indian the most, play the classical variation with knight f3, bishop e2, right? And be willing to play d5 and b4, c5, and like a bayonet attack. They'll be happy and they'll play their best. That's what a King's Indian player wants to get when they play the King's Indian. But in theory, it's a good position for white, and it's sort of like the critical position to practice or get good at. Or if you just want to stick with what you're comfortable with, play your f3, bishop e3, same-ish kind of game. Those are all reasonable choices. All right, and now to Dripman's question. Any high-level takeaways from the recent spate of freestyle events? The Freestyle Fridays on chess.com, it's been interesting to see how hesitant players are to fight for the center in the opening, often opting for passive setups so they don't blow it. Yeah, I can believe that. A lot of times when people first start playing freestyle chess, they play little moves like, b3, g3, just open their bishops, and, or they'll look for setups where you just put one pawn in the center and defend it, and you don't try and follow up. But then when you look at the tournament in Weissenhaus, and you see how the top players attack the position, they almost play too aggressively with white, right? We saw a lot of wins for black in the tournament, and that's partly because they were willing to play moves like, let's say d4 and d5 are already on the board. They're willing to play moves like e4 and c4, even if they have to recapture on that square with their rook or their queen, instead of with, a knight or a pawn, right? So they're looking to break the symmetry, gain advantages, put pressure on their opponent. And you see that kind of like innate optimism of a really top player, right? Someone who spent years and years going up and beating everyone around them. You gradually, but ultimately very strongly, after years of that experience, grow your confidence, where you're always expecting, like, the more lively the game, the more complicated the game, it's going to favor me. I'm always going to come out on top because you spent years coming out on top, right? When you were 1,000, you came out on top. When you were 1,500, you came out on top. When you were 2,000, you came out on top. When you were an IM, you came out on top. When you were a 13-year-old GM, you came out on top. All the way till you get to 2,700, 2,800 after, 6 years of playing chess or something ridiculously short, like for, Kamer and Gukesh and Fallujah and so forth. So you see them playing like very, very aggressively in the center, trying to create pressure along semi-open files by having a small space advantage, trying to, break symmetry for sure. Other people are more timid about that. But I haven't seen the games from Freestyle Fridays, right? Because Freestyle Friday always happens from, obviously I'd be interested, right? But Freestyle Friday always happens for me right when I'm sort of preparing breakfast for the kids, preparing their lunches, taking them to school, dropping them off, coming home. Like, it's just, I'm never there to watch or play it. RKJ, there should be a cool tool on chess.com where you can practice some knight endgames that I put in there years ago. It was one, I think it might be under practice now. At some point it was called drills. Let's try drills. Endgame practice. Have you ever seen this before? You can't see my whole screen. Hang on. I'll go back. So, look, I went here to the little learning hat. I went to practice. Click on drills. Endgame practice. It's going to kick off with a bunch of pawn endgames, you see? There are some knight endgames. So start with something like this. Practice playing this endgame with an extra pawn against the computer. The computer plays it quite well. I guess you can choose an engine level now. It used to be that the computer was just 3,400. So set the computer level to wherever your rating is, maybe. Right? And then practice this endgame a bunch. That should get you pretty far. And then, as you could see, there were other knight endgames as well. That was just the first one. You see that? I put like 6 knight endgames here. Kingside majority, queenside majority, space advantage, very few pawns. This is the one defending. You have to defend with 1 pawn against 2 pawns for the computer. So just practice those. Or if you can, find a human who wants to practice with you. And that'll be great too. You could take the positions from that from the drills there if you want, but then practice them against a human. Okay, tournaments are starting in like 5 minutes. So for those of you who want to play, 4 or 5 minutes. You should join the tournament. Smurfette wanted to know if Merles was playing. So let's try and answer that question. Merles is playing, Smurfette. Yep. Merles awaits in the 1700 plus group. You can play it however fast you want, Merles, for practice, right? RKJW, to me, the toughest endgames are queen endgames. But I think it might be different for different people. Although Merles also says queen endgames. I feel like queen and 1 pawn against queen is an endgame which even the average 2600 GM can't play correctly from either side. Right? Like queen and B pawn against queen, queen and A pawn against queen, queen and C pawn against queen. I think the average 2600 can't even play that well. Whereas the average 1000 rated player could play king and 1 pawn against king correctly. And most players between 1200 and 2000 can handle, king, bishop, and pawn versus king and bishop, or king, knight, and pawn versus king and knight, or king, bishop, and pawn versus king and knight. Like, to think that an endgame with just 1 pawn on it would be so difficult that GMs would constantly get it wrong. I guess I would say it might not just be a matter of taste. I have a suspicion like queen endings are harder than other endgames. That said, different people are going to have different difficulties with different kinds of endgames. Some people will find rook endings harder, some people knight endings, some people bishops. I think there'll be some variation. Yeah. Working class hero, you'd have to go to your profile on chess.com. You can also join one of these tournaments, and then your name will come up in the list. And if you're in the wrong one, you can leave it and go join a different one. But I can see my rating here. at my name just by going into live chess, but also if I click on my name and then click on myself, or maybe stats, it'll show me my ratings in correspondence chess, correspondence 960, blitz. It says I'm down 16 points. What? Bullet, rapid, etc. So you would want to look at your rapid rating. Hey, Ringa. Oh, sorry, Sumner. I see 2 of your messages deleted. I didn't see them in time. Sorry. You did find it? Okay, I'm sorry about the nightmare. Hey, Dr. Pfowl. All right. So tournaments are starting in 1 minute. Oh, so let me give you guys, let me give everyone the key spiel as the games are starting any moment now, okay? When you play your game, I suggest monotasking. You don't need to be doing anything else while you play your game. You can just focus on your own game. One of the things you should most not do during your game is listen to my live commentary. I appreciate it that there are some people who enjoy listening to my ragged, sick voice. But during your games, you really should not, especially because, I might talk about your game, and even if not, I'll be talking about some other game. It'll simply distract you. So just put aside distractions. I'm going to silence my phone. Oh, it's already pre-silenced. Go me. And then we just concentrate on one thing we're doing. Hey, Aaron. Thank you for joining. Hope you have some good games today. Dr. Pfowl, I am doing well. Thank you. A little bit sick because I've been up at 4 a.m. every single day watching this tournament in Germany. But it was worth it. It was super fun. And your rating will come back over 2,000 very soon. So, all right. Let's open up some games for ourselves. Got Dr. Pfowl, who we were just saying hi to. Getting this kind of e6, b6. Interesting defense from black. The idea is after e4 to then attack the center here. If you defend it in the wrong waves, there's always different interesting counters from black like this. Or if you go knight c3, black has bishop b4, re-threatening the pawn. So it's tricky to figure out how to handle this for white. Call up another game. Lauren against Aaron. And whoa, they're already into some crazy stuff. This Queen's Gambit accepted line just... I don't know, maybe I've been watching too much Fisher Random. This already looks kind of crazy how these pawns are just all out brawling here. Nice. Let's open up another one. Sir Flax. Oh, we got a lot of games today. This looks like a King's Gambit from Reza up against the Working Class Hero. Working Class Hero is not interested in winning that pawn on e4. Just says, let's open up all my bishops in the center. We get a pawn trade. Now black's up a pawn again. Get a check. Knight e3, sinking the knight. Working Class Hero taking the advantage immediately out of the opening in this game. That knight on e3 is very, very strong. So, in this position here, d4 for white. It's the normal move in the King's Gambit to try and get this pawn back. But in this move order, it's risky because black is going to defend the pawn with the knight, not with some pawn chain. And then you always have to worry about knight e3, which is almost always good for black as well. So black first throws in that trade to weaken white's control of e3 even further, then plops the knight in, and that knight looks good. White is going to struggle to get a good position because we need to win back the pawn we're down and have a strong center and get castled. You know, even if we can work this out with knight d1 or something, it's taking a lot of energy for white to get there. Also, black could grab this pawn, and then where is our king headed? Oh, and black does grab a pawn. Yep, no reason to create tilt by having unrealistic expectations, right? Imagining we can do something that we can't really do. Apologies. Don't worry, I'm not too sick. It just kind of sounds like it. I'm mostly all right. Now, black, for their part, needs to make sure that they develop all their pieces. You know, it's all well and good to point out that white's king is bad and win a pawn and twirl around with your knight victoriously, but this knight has now moved like 5 times. White's got all 3 minor pieces out. It's their turn. They're going to put a rook on an open file to your king in a moment. I don't know which, but they're going to, I think. I can feel it. So, as black, you have to make sure that you do, you know, use the pieces that aren't as obvious here. Welcome, Bill the Drill. Welcome. These are viewer tournaments. So all these games we are watching are just from people like you and me. Just some normal dojo folks. We spent a week watching Magnus Carlsen and Vincent Keimer and Fabiano Caruana and Hikaru Nakamura. And as of last night, we're back to watching the common folk. There goes the rook to the G file. Yep. And C6 does not bring out a piece. I'm getting a little worried for working class hero now, right? A little worried. That development is dragging. In this case, they were afraid of knight d5 coming in at some point, dealing with the knight, maybe the pawn hitting the queen. But you have to solve your problems with development at a certain point. You know, like if that's what you're afraid of, then play this move. If they go d5, now knight d5's out of the question. Except that you might move your bishop twice. They didn't make progress, they just moved a pawn, you know? And so you just gotta keep the pieces flowing into the game. Reza repositions, aiming clearly at black's king with rook and bishop. And here comes a piece for working class hero. Bishop to g4. Hey, Sicilian King. Cool. Since I've never fully written a book by myself, it must be the Chess Dojo book. Written by something like 100 dojoers, including Jesse, Kostya, and I. The arenas are chess.com rapid rated. Yep, they are. Is your game done, Dr. Pfel? I had it open before. Nope, still going. There's the position. Let's hope Pfel is not listening as I suggest to move queen b6, breaking the structure on the queen side, getting at the weak bishop on b7, just opening it up. And then it's really hard for black to keep that bishop properly defended. Oh yeah, it's a pretty big book, Sicilian King. I'm sorry for the cost. It was just a lot of paper, basically. It was just a lot of paper. All right. It's true. If you're not able to win the game directly based on the bishop on b7, black has an isolated a pawn. That's going to be a problem in the endgame. So, all kinds of advantages on that move. All right, let's see what's going on in this wild barn burner. So bishop g4 comes in, knight e5, queen h4. Now, this king looks really badly placed. White's got way more pieces than black. Should they have no way out of this? Bishop's got them covered here. The knight is basically, I lost my game. The knight's covering these two squares. It is basically a checkmate pattern. So, white resigned, but I don't know if I would resign. Let's see. I'd like to go rook g3. Pawn takes, king takes. Queen g5 here. In this position, I would resign. Check here. And in that position, I would also resign. Okay. So I would have just played one or two more moves there as white, but it looks like that queen h4 move, if handled properly by working class hero, was about to lead to utter devastation for white. Too bad. Too bad. And they're off to the races with the next game. Let's go back to P-Foul's game. P-Foul did not find queen b6. But they did avoid knight to d3 check. So that was good. I was afraid to mention it just because I didn't know for sure if P-Foul was still in chat with us since they just asked a question. But okay, here we go. So now queen h4, queen d4. White centralizes nicely. Bishop a6. Yeah, that bishop was not enjoying the granite on d5. Now you're answering what I'm saying now. Okay, I'll watch a different game. Sorry. My apologies. Okay, this is the Queen's Gambit accepted. Black attacks White's pawn on e4, and this is an interesting move from White. Queen c2 defending it. If you wanted to defend it, knight c3 is an obvious move, but then b4 kicking your knight, and this pawn goes, right? If you play e5, that could also be desirable, but the knight finds a really good square in the middle of the board. And Aaron says that's not to his taste. So he wants to hold the strong center. In general, in chess, I prefer to only play e5 if I kick my opponent's knight to a bad square versus to a good square. So that makes sense. Bishop b7, very logical. It defends the rook, which allows you to at some point play a6 and support this pawn structure. It also prepares to be on a long diagonal if you ever get to play c takes b5 or c5 for black. So that's very logical. From Lauren, development. Asking the question of the bishop. And so now Aaron has to decide. Is that bishop trading for a knight to save time? Or is this bishop more valuable than a knight? After all, the point of a pawn center is largely to keep your opponent's knights on bad squares. And will he just, keep that piece on the board? Excuse me again. Sorry, what do I need to show chat? Bishop f4. Keeping that piece. Just like what I would have done, Aaron. I'm also all about keeping the piece. You need to see Kleenexes? There's lots of Kleenexes, unfortunately. Piles and piles of Kleenexes. What would we have to do with enforcement of your tournament? You want to sponsor a tournament that's somehow dojo related? If you want to run a money tournament, it probably makes sense to use 2 cameras. Like chess.com does, yeah. Could go through Annie. I'm not sure what Annie is. If you're asking, do I agree with chess.com's policy of using 2 cameras for cheat detection, I would say I'm not currently an expert on cheat detection, but it probably makes sense. So I guess I would suggest you do it sort of like them. Oh. Okay. Hey, T-Drev. I mean, as far as I know, chess.com's cheat detection would be your most cutting edge or professional option to kind of, follow what they do. If you're running an online money tournament. I got Foos saying hi. Right, have the players go on cam, and 2 cams, right? One showing the player and one showing their screen. Right? There's like one camera pointed at them and one camera pointed kind of from behind them. Sure. Yeah. I mean, as I said, I don't have like great expertise on it, but I think it would make sense to do it like chess.com. Should be 7. Rook FD1. Yeah, so Aaron is in no ways threatening to win back this pawn, right? Lauren has safely, solidly defended it. But Aaron has also successfully maintained this nice, strong center, so all the black pieces are a bit worse than all the white pieces. maybe with the exception of this bishop e2, which suffers a little from that pawn on c4. So we have a very interesting situation. Not obvious how white or black is going to make progress. Often the best way to make progress for black is at some point to play c5, opening the bishop and blowing up the center. And so a rook on d1 is, poised to fight against that option. But now black's making a big move with b4, kicking that knight. If it goes to a2, there's b3 winning a piece, so it has to go to b1. And black is probably intending to now go b3 and kick the queen off the e-pawn and trade the c-pawn for the e-pawn, right? Because there's going to be no saving the c-pawn next, I don't think. b3 gets played. There goes the c-pawn, there goes the e-pawn, there goes the b-pawn. So white recovers the pawn in this sequence, right? Black trades 2 side pawns for 1 center pawn. The remaining pawn structure is more or less equal. White's got more space with this pawn, but it's not a great isolated pawn. However, whose pieces are better as we reach this situation? Bishop on f4 is preventing the move rook b8. If black could play rook b8, I would feel like black was okay. Without rook b8, I would suspect white's going to be a little bit better. Black finds a pretty good move. The queen trade would be a very playable endgame for black. So now, as white, you're really wondering if you can play queen e3 or queen c2 and keep queens on the board. Keep it middle game. Keep it middle game. And I guess, my first thought was queen e3, but then I noticed that, knight d5 is going to cost me time and happiness. So I suspect queen c2, which is just played by Aaron. That's going to be the right one. And we've got a very playable position. I would guess white has an advantage in the, 0.2, 0.3 range. I'm going to go find a sweater since I'm sick and cold. I thought we knew in advance.
Well, no, I didn't know you. In advance, I was going to go to the gym and you weren't going to sleep in. So I don't know. It seems like the plans changed. How about you do 1 more hour math?
Okay. Hey, no problem, Dr. P-Fowl. I was just being cautious. I hope that I didn't cause any offense by switching to another game. I wanted to try to cover your game, but I'll just do it on another game. All right. So our baby was up all night, and my partner is struggling. So I think I'm going to finish the commentary on this one cool game that we have in front of us, and then go help out with the family. All right, folks? Sorry it's not turning out exactly like we wanted. So this a5 move from Aaron... Or sorry, we were at queen c2 when I walked away, right? So knight f6, supporting the knight. Makes sense. It's an aggressive choice for black, trying to keep the pieces on good squares. But it makes sense. The knight on d7 heading towards, maybe a good square on d5 if this knight has to trade for the knight on b1 at some point soon, right? What, Dripman? All right. Congratulations. Happy times. I mean, miserable as well, but it's partly the point of life. So, congratulations. It doesn't get any better than that. Dylan's not like a little kid. He's well of age for this step. Okay, so Aaron plays a useful move in a5, grabbing some space, improves the rook, and forces this queen to go somewhere worse. c7 would be her best option, so then she has to choose between going back to the d file with the rook or a little bit into the corner on c7. I would go to d8 because you see after queen c7, the queen is really she's kind of stuck in this corner, and I don't feel comfortable with that. So if I were Lauren, I would have gone back to d8, I think, here. I don't love where that queen ends up. Knight e5 comes in. Yeah, Driven, I had my first kid at 33, and I wish it had been sooner, because some of it is so physical early on. The lugging them around and all that. But 33 should be fine. I mean, it worked out fine for my first kid. By the third kid, I was starting to feel it. Okay, c5. I guess white's threatening knight c6, but c5 walks into queen a4, and now we're not castling, and we're blowing open the center without castling. This looks like black's getting into big trouble here. I guess black was afraid that if you castle, white's really going to take this pawn from you, hitting your queen and your bishop. You can't do any rook c8 shenanigans, not because of knight takes queen, but because of knight takes bishop and then knight takes rook. So that looks kind of bad, but I think then the solution must be rook c8. Because you can't blow up the center on your own king. This is like a Wile E. Coyote moment for the black king here, this c5 move. Life balance with chess. Yeah, that would be a cool thing, Charlie. But it's also so intimate to talk about, being a father and a husband. It would be you'd have to have the rest of your family on board, I think. To start talking about stuff like that. King f8. T-Drev, that's a while back. The online King's Gambit course. Wow. We've got an old school King's Gambit here with us here today. Nice. That course was really fun. Knight c3 from white. Black takes the pawn. It's going to be hard to rearrange this position for black because the knight's hitting f7. So you can't just walk into the corner with the king to h7. Black's going to have to do some amount of fighting here to save themselves, right? Maybe trade off this knight somehow. Oof. Wow, C-Pawn, congratulations. The Dojoers are growing up. The Dojoers are growing up. I'm glad that so far it's been wonderful being a father. That's great. That's good news. Yeah, if Chess Latte comes in with a kid now, Charlie, then we can't believe it. I would more expect Chess Latte to come in and say, hey, I'm the chess champion of Japan now. That's what I would expect. All right, we get a knight trade. This seems like good for white, right? That you're bringing the next rook over. Black wants to do some tactical stuff, huh? Knight d7 will trade the bishop and avoid a disaster. But honestly, even if you couldn't trade the bishop, what about this move? Check, you just come here, and then what for black, right? Looks pretty strong for white, the attack over here. So, yeah, too much opening up of the game, too much of white's second rook coming in while black's is here. It's looking very rough for black. Oh, and white's threatening rook takes knight, so another answer to bishop c5 would be to take. Oof. 2 minutes each. So it's definitely going to be speedy here, which always gives some chances of mixing it up. Knight c5 with the tempo on the queen. Big mistake would be knight d7 check in order to avoid paying a tempo. Although even after that big mistake, white might be winning. But in general, your knight on e5 is really good covering this. Actually, the more I think about it, the more I could see this happening, you know? Because the rook here is so good. But you threaten like bishop f3 and stuff, right? But that said, maybe black even just moves away with the king. And then if you trade, their bishop comes here before your rook gets here. Might still be good for white. Who knows, right? But queen d1 from Aaron. That makes sense. Other move that looked good to me was queen c2. Keeping d1 for the rook. Some people might hesitate because of rook c8. But I think after rook c1, any knight move, we should have queen c8 winning, right? I don't even see where the knight can go, but let's say it could go somewhere and there wasn't a tactic other than queen c8. This should almost always be good for white, right? Like you play here, 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 here. So we ignore that the knight's hanging there. You know, this queen's hanging, this rook's hanging. White can just clean everything up. So I think queen c2 is playable, but you'd have to do some calculating. Black tries to block the file. Oh, it's screaming rook takes d5. Yes! Come on now. 1 minute on the clock, so couldn't calculate everything. You have to have some confidence to go for this pizzazz. But it feels right. It feels right for white. Knight e6. I thought that might come. Now, for white, you could play knight f7 if you're still feeling it. The idea is king f7, bishop c4. I don't actually see a way for black to defend the knight after that. So that looks very sound. You can also try and set it up with bishop c4, but you give your opponent a moment for rook d8. Aaron thinking, under a minute, gotta find it all. Knight f7 would be good. Goes for knight g6, which is similar. It forces pawn takes knight because king e8, queen c6 is just devastating. You have to go like queen d7, queen a8, or king d8, rook d1, and king g8 hangs the bishop. So black's got to take it, and then you get queen e6. But knight f7 was probably a tiny bit stronger. Takes the rook. Wait a minute, the bishop was hanging! The bishop was more hanging because this queen is defending the rook. That rook in the corner is not worth so much. Ah! Knight f4, it gets complicated. He's got to find queen f7 and pick up the knight. And the game goes on. White is up 2 pawns, but black has plenty of chances to defend still. As the rook comes out, white's rook isn't in the game yet, and black can target both of these pawns. Plus, there are certain opposite-colored bishop endings you can draw. But with this pawn weak, actually, I think black wants to play for some middle game initiative here. Oh yeah, it's gotten complicated here. I'm not able to today, Drew. I'm really sorry. We're going to get bishop c5 and then rook f1. Well, now with queen e3, we can't play rook f1. Uh-oh. Black has equalized off of this little mistake. Queen had to go to g3, I think. Big time pressure mistake from Aaron there was capturing that rook in the corner, which is not worth much, instead of this bishop. This would have been winning for white. King here. You've got queen f5 and mate. King here. You can save the bishop with a move like bishop d6. Huge threats. And lastly, you know, queen here takes here. I don't know if we should go queen e4 or bishop d3, but basically, you know, a position like this, white's up a piece. Full piece. Plus a pawn, plus this thing and this thing. That would have been the game over. After this, even if white didn't play queen e3, like, black's got a lot of stuff going on here. Aaron manages to find time to grab the a-pawn with 30 seconds on the clock. So there is still some hope to win, but it's a messy position. Black has got counterplay. There's the weak back rank, so there's always tactical shots there, like rook a2. If the rook takes, there's back rank mate. Rook moves away. No, we get a queen check. Oh my god, does white have queen e4 winning the game here? 20 seconds for Aaron as he tries to seize a counter tactic. Finds queen a8 to e4, and Aaron wins the game. Lauren had a little more time and needed to think longer before rook a2. I mean, they thought 20 seconds. They just, yeah, it just wasn't right. Dang. So the player with no time is the one who has the awareness and spots the tactic. And Aaron turns it around and wins the game that was starting to slip away. Dramatic. We can say that for sure black had some chances in that opposite colored bishop position, right? That was wild and intense. Oh, Merles is playing the King's Gambit, trying to keep me from leaving. Even my old knight f3 line. I'm like the only person who played this line that I've ever seen. Merles is now the second player I've ever seen play this knight f3 line. All right, folks, but I'm going to go be an okay father, let's say, and an okay husband, and leave the games here. I'm sorry for those of you who are enjoying the show and the commentary today. That's just the way it goes sometimes with a baby in the house. The arenas are still open for an hour and a half. Wait, 2 hours and a half? Oh, that was just the tip of the iceberg? Oh, I'm sorry. They're still open for 2.5 hours for anyone who wants to play. So if you're over on YouTube, here's a link from which you can find the games. And for those of you on Twitch, !play, you can find those links. Eric, Rengar, are you still around? Do you want to do some commentary? Like on your channel? We could raid over to your channel if you're around, if you want to watch the tournaments. I don't know if you're fired up and ready to fire up a stream. Getting rusty happens quite quickly, actually, DL, you know? Kind of, it can happen quite quickly. Which is okay. It's fine to take breaks. We also sometimes get better in different ways while we're taking a break. But getting rusty does come pretty quickly, and then, yeah, you know, you just have to accept and be used to the process of shaking off the rust. Yeah. All right, looks like Rengar's not around, folks. I'm going to send a raid elsewhere. Bullet, bullet, bullet. I'm not raiding bullet. It's not going to happen. That's great, DL. Well, it's every week at the same time, so hopefully occasionally you can do it, but if you'd like us to try and schedule some at different times, we can try and do that too. We can try and move it around a little bit sometimes. I could definitely run some of these during the week. It's just I imagine most people would be at work, so I don't know how attendance would be, but I can do it occasionally, just for a different time and place. All right. And then still do the Saturday one. All right, I'm off, folks.